The last transmission from the Driven scout ship contained only screaming. Admiral Salvan replayed the audio 3 times, searching for something useful, coordinates, enemy descriptions, weapon signatures. There was nothing, just raw terror, then silence. His tactical officer, Brennick, stood rigid beside the command console, scales pale with unease. "That was the 4th scout team this cycle," Brennick said quietly. "All sent beyond the boundary markers, all gone." Salvan dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. The Driven Collective had conquered 12 star systems. His 7th expansion fleet carried 900 warships, each capable of reducing a continent to ash. Whatever primitive defense the humans possessed, it would crumble like every other. The blue planet grew larger on the view screen. Earth, they called it. A small world orbiting an unremarkable star. The inhabitants had achieved spaceflight barely 3 centuries ago, infants by galactic standards. Yet they had done something no other species had attempted. They had drawn a line in space and told the universe not to cross it. The warning had arrived standard cycles ago, transmitted in perfect Driven language. "To the approaching fleet, you are entering Terran-protected space. Beyond the boundary marked at coordinates 447 sigma, defensive systems will engage automatically. We do not negotiate with armed vessels past this point. We do not accept surrender past this point. We do not take prisoners past this point. Turn back now. This is your only warning." Salvan had laughed when he first heard it. His officers had laughed with him. A single planet threatening an armada. The arrogance was almost admirable. But now 4 scout teams had vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. No debris, no energy signatures, no bodies drifting in the void. Ships and crews simply ceased to exist. "Admiral," Brennick ventured, "perhaps we should request reinforcements or conduct long-range reconnaissance before." "Before what?" Salvan interrupted. "Before we admit fear to the High Command. Before we tell them that the mighty 7th Fleet hesitates at the border of a world that discovered fire while our ancestors ruled galaxies." Brennick lowered his head. "Understood, Admiral." Salvan turned back to the view screen. The boundary coordinates glowed red on the navigation display, an invisible line drawn through empty space. Beyond it lay Earth. Defenseless and waiting, or so it appeared. Deep beneath the surface of the human homeworld, General Ada Reyes monitored the approaching fleet from the Global Defense Network's primary command center. Holographic displays showed every Driven vessel in precise detail. Their power signatures, weapon configurations, crew complements. Humanity had watched them coming for months. Her adjutant, a young officer named Wren, handed her the latest projection. "They will cross the boundary in approximately 6 hours, General, all 900 ships." Reyes studied the data without expression, and the warning transmission. "Received and acknowledged. They are ignoring it. Standard response for aggressive species." Reyes nodded slowly. It was always the same. Every species that discovered Earth assumed humanity would be easy prey. They saw a single planet, no visible fleet, no orbital fortresses. They saw weakness. What they failed to understand was that humanity had learned its lessons long ago in wars fought against itself. They had learned that visible strength invites challenge, while invisible strength invites only fear, and only after it reveals itself. "Activate Protocol 7, Reyes ordered. "All defense grids to standby, displacement arrays to full charge." Wren hesitated. "General, once we engage, there is no going back. The galaxy will know what we are capable of." "The galaxy needs to know," Reyes replied. "That is the entire point. We did not build these defenses to use them. We built them so that using them once would mean never having to use them again." Across the void, Salvan gave the order to advance. 900 warships moved in perfect formation toward the boundary line. Their weapons powered up, shields activated, crews prepared for whatever primitive resistance awaited them. Salvan expected missiles, perhaps laser arrays or nuclear devices. He expected desperate courage from a doomed species. He expected a battle. He did not expect silence. The fleet crossed the boundary. Nothing happened. No alarms, no enemy contacts, no weapons fire, just empty space and the distant glow of the human sun. "Sensors clear," Brennick reported. "No hostile activity detected." Solvan allowed himself a thin smile. "Bluffing. As I suspected, all ships maintain formation, set course for Earth. We will be in orbital bombardment range within." "Admiral," Brennick's voice cracked. "The rear guard, they are gone." Solvan turned sharply. "What do you mean, gone?" 47 ships, Admiral. They were there moments ago. Now they are simply not. No explosions, no distress signals. They vanished." The command deck fell silent. Solvan stared at the tactical display, watching as another cluster of icons flickered and disappeared. Then another, then another. "All ships full reverse," he bellowed. "Get us back across the boundary." But the boundary was gone. The stars themselves had shifted. Space no longer looked the same. Navigation systems spun uselessly, unable to find reference points that should have been constant for millennia. On Earth, General Reyes watched the enemy fleet's confusion with grim satisfaction. The displacement fields were working perfectly, plucking ships from normal space one by one, depositing them somewhere they would never escape. "Log the engagement," she said quietly, "and prepare a message for the Interstellar Council. The Dreven Collective has lost a fleet. Others will want to know why." Wren nodded. "What should the message say, General?" Reyes considered the question. "The truth. We warned them. They did not listen. Now they are gone forever. Let every species that dreams of conquest hear those words and understand. Earth does not bluff." Brennick had stopped counting the missing ships after 300. The tactical display flickered with ghost signatures, vessels that appeared for heartbeats before dissolving into static. The Dreven fleet, once a proud formation of 900 warships, had become a scattered herd of terrified animals running through darkness they could not understand. Admiral Solvan stood motionless at the center of the command deck, watching his legacy evaporate. His claws had carved grooves into the armrests of his throne. His eyes had not blinked in what felt like hours. Around him, officers whispered prayers to gods their species had abandoned centuries ago. "Report," he demanded, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. Brennick consulted his instruments with trembling hands. 412 vessels confirmed missing, Admiral. We cannot establish contact with any of them. Long-range sensors detect nothing, no debris, no energy signatures, no biological traces. They are simply not there." "Ships do not simply vanish," Solvan growled. "Something is taking them. Find it, destroy it." "We have tried, Admiral." "Every weapon we fire passes through empty space. Every scan returns nothing. It is as if we are fighting fog." Solvan wanted to scream at him, to demand solutions, to restore order through fury. But fury required energy, and energy required hope. He had neither remaining. Somewhere in the void beyond his perception, human operators coordinated the harvest with mechanical precision. Each displacement field required exact calculations: mass, velocity, spatial coordinates. Each captured vessel was transported to coordinates that existed outside normal space, a pocket dimension created specifically for this purpose. No death, no destruction, just removal, clean, efficient, absolute. General Reyes observed the operation from her underground command center, surrounded by holographic projections of the shrinking enemy fleet. Her staff worked in focused silence, adjusting field generators, compensating for Dreven evasive maneuvers that achieved nothing. "They are beginning to panic," Wren observed. "Their formation has completely collapsed." "Expected," Reyes replied. "Fear breaks discipline faster than weapons. They have never encountered an enemy they cannot see, cannot fight, cannot even detect. Their minds are destroying themselves more effectively than we ever could." "Some might call this cruel, General." Reyes turned to face her adjutant. "Cruel would be burning their worlds as they plan to burn ours. Cruel would be leaving their families to wonder what happened. Their crews will live, Wren. They will have food, water, shelter. They will simply never return. That is not cruelty. That is consequence." Aboard his flagship, Solvan made a decision born of desperation. If he could not fight an invisible enemy, he would make them show themselves. He ordered all remaining ships to concentrate their fire on a single point in space. Maximum yield, sustained bombardment. Perhaps the sheer energy would overwhelm whatever technology hid the humans. 300 weapons fired simultaneously. Space itself seemed to burn. The combined firepower could have cracked a small moon. When the light faded, nothing had changed. Nothing had been hit. Nothing had been revealed. The ships that fired had simply wasted ammunition on void. And then, for the first time, something appeared on Driven's sensors. It was massive, larger than any vessel Solvan had ever seen. Angular and black, it seemed to absorb light, rather. Then reflect it, no weapons were visible on its hull. No engines glowed. It simply existed, hanging in space like a patient predator. "Target acquired," Brennick shouted, relief flooding his voice. "All weapons focus fire." The fleet obeyed. Every remaining ship turned its arsenal toward the human vessel. Energy beams and projectiles converged on the dark shape. They passed through it like light through water. The human ship did not move, did not react, did not acknowledge the assault. It simply drifted closer, and as it did, the vessels nearest to it began vanishing. One by one, Driven warships flickered and disappeared, swallowed by something that weapons could not touch. Solvan watched 80 ships disappear in less than a minute. His flagship's shields remained at full power. His weapons systems reported optimal function. Every instrument told him he was ready to fight. But there was nothing to fight. The enemy did not exist in any way he understood. A communication override crackled through every speaker on every remaining vessel. A human voice spoke in perfect Driven, calm and measured. "You were warned, you crossed the boundary. This is not combat. This is housekeeping. Your empire will survive. Your species will continue. But every ship that entered our space will be removed. You have 93 vessels remaining. In 1 hour you will have none. Use that time however you wish. We will not speak to you again." The transmission ended. Solvan slumped into his command throne. Around him, officers wept openly. Warriors who had conquered worlds knelt on the deck and begged for mercy from beings who were not listening. "What do we do, Admiral?" Brennick asked, his voice barely a whisper. Solvan stared at the view screen, watching more of his ships blink out of existence. He thought of his mate, his children, his home. He thought of the warning transmission he had mocked, the boundary he had dismissed as primitive posturing. "We die," he said simply, "or worse, we disappear." The human vessel drifted closer, and the darkness followed. Solvan's flagship was the last vessel remaining. 71 hours had passed since the fleet crossed the boundary. 900 ships reduced to one. Thousands of crew members vanished into whatever void the humans had created. The admiral sat alone on his command deck. His officers had disappeared with the other vessels, leaving him in a silence more terrible than any battle. He had tried everything. Surrender broadcasts went unanswered. Distress signals vanished into static. Even his attempt to self-destruct failed. The humans had somehow disabled his weapons systems remotely, leaving him alive against his will. Through the view screen, he watched the human ship drift closer. It had followed him for hours, never attacking, never communicating, just waiting. Solvan understood now that he was being kept alive deliberately. A witness, a messenger. General Reyes monitored the final phase from Earth. The operation had proceeded exactly as designed. 0 casualties on either side. The Driven lived, they simply existed elsewhere now. The pocket dimension had been prepared centuries ago for exactly this purpose. A quarantine zone where aggressive species could be contained without genocide. "The Admiral's flagship is the last one," Wren reported. "Do we take him with the others?" Reyes considered the question. "No, release his navigation systems, open a corridor back to Driven space, let him go." Wren frowned. He could warn the others they might send another fleet. "That is exactly what we want." Reyes allowed herself a thin smile. Dead enemies become martyrs, missing fleets become mysteries, but a single survivor, broken and terrified, telling stories of an enemy that cannot be fought, that becomes legend. Legends prevent wars. Solvon felt his ship shudder as systems came back online. Navigation displays flickered to life, showing a clear path through space. A corridor leading back toward Driven territory. The boundary that had trapped him simply opened, inviting him to leave. He did not understand. He had invaded their space, threatened their world, and now they were releasing him. It made no sense by any logic he knew. A final transmission appeared on his screen, text only, written in Driven. Admiral Solvon, you are being returned to your people. Your fleet exists in a place beyond your reach, alive but removed from this universe. They are not suffering, they will not return. You have been spared to deliver a message. Earth does not seek war, Earth does not seek conquest. Earth asks only to be left alone. Cross our boundary again, and there will be no survivor to tell the story. Go home, tell them what you have seen. Let this be the last fleet that has to learn this lesson. Solvon read the words 3 times. His hands shook as he entered coordinates for home. As his ship accelerated toward the corridor, he looked back at the human vessel one final time. It remained motionless, watching him leave, patient as death. On Earth, Reyes turned to address her command staff. Begin Phase 2. The galaxy will have questions. We need to be ready with answers. The Interstellar Council convened 17 standard days later. Representatives from 34 species gathered in the orbital assembly hall, demanding explanations. The Driven delegate, a furious elder named Korath, called for immediate retaliation against humanity. They destroyed our fleet, he roared. 900 vessels, this is an act of war. We destroyed nothing, replied Ambassador Lydia Okonkwo, humanity's sole representative. She stood calm amid the hostile stares, her voice carrying without effort. Your fleet invaded our space after receiving explicit warnings. They were removed, not killed. The distinction matters. Removed where? Another delegate demanded. Somewhere they cannot threaten anyone. Somewhere they can live out their lives in peace. We do not believe in genocide, but we absolutely believe in consequences. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had planned their own invasions of Earth suddenly reconsidered. Others demanded to know more about human defensive capabilities. The Driven delegate threatened war, then fell silent when Okonkwo asked a simple question. With what fleet? Admiral Solvon testified before the Driven High Command 1 month after his return. He told them everything. The vanishing ships, the unstoppable technology, the enemy that could not be seen or fought. He described the human vessel that had followed him, watching without attacking, sparing him only to ensure the story would be told. The High Command listened in silence. When Solvon finished, the eldest commander spoke. You recommend we abandon all plans for Earth? Solvon nodded slowly. I recommend we forget Earth exists. I recommend we tell our children that the blue planet is a myth. I recommend we erase the coordinates from every database and pray that we never accidentally drift into their space again. You are suggesting we surrender without terms. I am suggesting, Solvon replied, his voice cracking, that there are no terms. They do not want tribute. They do not want territory. They want to be left alone. Every species in the galaxy should. Thank whatever gods they worship that humans only want to be left alone. Because if they ever wanted something else, nothing could stop them from taking it. The chamber fell silent. Across the galaxy, the story spread. Species whispered about the humans, the quiet species on the small blue world who asked only for peace and enforced that request with technology beyond comprehension. Some called them monsters, others called them gods, most simply called them a species to avoid. And on Earth, humanity waited, patient, prepared, hoping that someday the lessons would no longer need teaching. 3 years after the Driven fleet disappeared, a small vessel approached Earth's boundary. It carried no weapons. Its shields were lowered. Its crew consisted of 6 individuals from a species called the Venari, small, fragile beings with luminous eyes and delicate wings. They had traveled for months across hostile space, evading pirates and predators, seeking the one species in the galaxy that might help them. Their homeworld was dying, not from natural disaster but from conquest. The Braxian Empire had claimed their system, enslaved their population, and begun stripping their planet of resources. The Venari had no military, no allies, no hope, until they heard the stories about Earth. Ambassador Okonkwo received the Venari delegation personally. She listened as their leader, a female named Lyris, described the horrors her people faced. Braxian soldiers executing dissenters, children separated from families, ancient forests burned to fuel warships, a civilization being erased while the galaxy watched in comfortable silence. "Why come to us?" Okonkwo asked. "We have made it clear we do not interfere in galactic affairs." Lyris met her eyes without flinching. "Because you are the only ones who could interfere. Everyone else fears the Braxians. You fear nothing. We are not asking you to fight for us. We are asking you to teach us how to make our own boundary. We want to become like you, untouchable, unreachable, safe." The request was unprecedented. Humanity had never shared defensive technology with another species. The risks were obvious. Weapons that could protect could also threaten. Displacement fields in the wrong hands could become tools of aggression. General Reyes joined the discussion via secure channel from the Global Defense Network. She had aged in the years since the Driven incident, but her mind remained sharp. She studied the Venari delegation with careful attention. "Your species has no history of warfare," she observed. "No military tradition, no territorial ambitions. You develop spaceflight to explore, not to conquer." "That is why we are being destroyed," Lyris replied bitterly. "We believed peace was natural. We believed others would share our values. We were wrong." Reyes nodded slowly. "We made similar mistakes once. Our history is written in blood because we trusted too easily and prepared too little. We learned. Perhaps you can learn faster." Okonkwo turned to Reyes with surprise. "You are considering this?" "I am considering something larger," Reyes replied. "The Driven learned their lesson, but the Braxians have not. They continue conquering, enslaving, destroying. Eventually they will look toward Earth. We can wait for that day, or we can shape the galaxy into something less hostile." The decision took months of debate. Human leaders argued fiercely about isolation versus engagement. Some insisted that sharing technology would lead to disaster. Others pointed out that a galaxy filled with vulnerable species was inherently unstable. Eventually, some aggressor would become powerful enough to threaten even Earth. In the end, humanity chose a middle path. They would not give the Venari weapons. Instead, they would give them protection. Earth's boundary would extend to include Venari space. Any ship that attacked the Venari would face the same fate as the Driven fleet. The announcement sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. The Braxian Emperor demanded an immediate meeting with human representatives. His threats were elaborate and theatrical. Okonkwo listened politely, then responded with 7 words. "Withdraw from Venari space. This is final." The Braxians tested the boundary once. A small attack group crossed into Venari territory, expecting to demonstrate that human protection was merely political theater. The ships vanished before they could fire a single shot. After that, the Braxians withdrew. Other species watched these events with growing interest. The Terrellian collective, long oppressed by aggressive neighbors, petitioned for human protection. The Senari refugees, driven from their homeworld by religious persecution, asked if Earth would shelter them. One by one, vulnerable civilizations approached humanity with the same desperate hope. The Terran compact formed gradually without formal treaties or grand ceremonies. It was simply an understanding. Any species that committed to peace could shelter under Earth's protection. Any aggressor that threatened compact members would face displacement. Not death, not destruction, just permanent removal from the universe they knew. Reyes retired from military service on the 5th anniversary of the Compact's formation. She had spent her entire career preparing for wars that never came. Now she watched as humanity's defenses created something she had never expected: genuine peace. "We built weapons to prevent violence," she told Okonkwo during her final briefing. "I never imagined we would use them to build a civilization." "Perhaps that was always the purpose," Okonkwo replied. "Power without conquest, strength without cruelty. We became what we needed to be so that others would not have to." On Venari Prime, Lyris watched human engineers install the final components of her world's defensive grid. Her children played in gardens that Braxian soldiers had planned to burn. Her people rebuilt homes that should have been rubble. A human technician approached her with a smile. "All systems operational. Your boundary is active. You are safe now." Lyris felt tears forming in her luminous eyes. "How can we ever repay this?" The technician considered the question. "Live well, treat others kindly. Someday, when you are strong enough, protect someone weaker than yourselves. That is what we ask. That is all we have ever asked." The compact grew. The galaxy changed. And humanity waited, patient as always, for the day when protection would no longer be necessary. 20 years had reshaped the galaxy. The Terran Compact now included 47 species spread across 300 star systems. Wars between member worlds had become unthinkable, not because humanity forbade them, but because peaceful resolution had become easier than conflict. Disputes were mediated, resources shared, grievances addressed. The galaxy was learning to cooperate instead of conquer. Admiral Solvan still lived, though he had long since resigned his commission. He spent his final years on a quiet colony world, writing histories that younger Dreven studied with somber attention. His accounts of the human encounter had become required reading in military academies, not as tactical analysis, but as warning. He died peacefully in his sleep, having never forgotten the darkness that had swallowed his fleet. His last words, recorded by a medical attendant, were simple: "Do not wake the humans." In the pocket dimension, the displaced Dreven fleet still existed. Ships floated in eternal twilight, maintained by automatic systems, crewed by beings who had accepted their fate. They had built communities on artificial stations, raised families, created art and music. Their prison had become a world unto itself. Humanity monitored them occasionally, ensuring survival systems functioned. There was talk of eventually allowing them to return, once the generations who remembered conquest had passed. But that decision lay far in the future. Ambassador Okonkwo delivered her final address to the Interstellar Council on the 20th anniversary of the Dreven incident. She had grown old in service to her species, and weariness showed in her movements, but her voice remained strong. "When I first stood before this council, you feared us," she began. "You saw a species that could erase fleets without battle, and you imagined monsters. Some of you still imagine that. But I ask you to consider what we have actually done these 20 years. She paused, surveying the assembled delegates. "We have not conquered, we have not demanded tribute, we have not expanded beyond our original boundaries. We have simply protected those who asked for protection and removed those who chose violence. Is that monstrous? Or is it something else? Something this galaxy had never seen before?" A delegate from the Terrellian Collective rose to speak. "You have changed us, Ambassador. My people once believed survival required aggression. We armed ourselves, threatened neighbors, prepared for wars we thought inevitable. Now we trade with those neighbors. Our children play with their children. We have forgotten how to fear." Similar testimonies followed. Species that had warred for centuries now collaborated. Resources once hoarded were freely shared. The galaxy was not perfect. Conflicts still arose, grievances festered, old hatreds lingered, but the worst excesses had ended. No one committed genocide when displacement awaited aggressors. After the ceremony, Okonkwo returned to Earth for the last time. She walked through parks that her grandmother had helped plant, past monuments to wars humanity had fought against itself. She thought about how far her species had come, from tribal violence to global conflict to something approaching wisdom. General Reyes had passed away 5 years earlier, but her legacy remained in every defensive installation, every diplomatic protocol, every principle that guided the compact. She had understood something essential. Power meant nothing without purpose. Strength without compassion was just another form of weakness. A young girl approached Okonkwo in the park, perhaps 10 years old, with curious eyes and an innocent smile. "Are you the ambassador?" she asked. "My teacher told us about you. She said you talked to aliens." Okonkwo laughed softly. "Sometimes, not as much as I used to." "Are the aliens scary?" The question deserved a thoughtful answer. Okonkwo knelt to meet the child's eyes. "Some of them were once. They came here wanting to hurt us, but we did not let them. And slowly they learned that hurting others was not the only way to live. Now most of them are friends." "What about the ones who are still scary?" Okonkwo smiled. "We watch them carefully, and if they try to hurt anyone, we make them go away, not forever, just until they learn better. Does that make sense?" The girl nodded seriously. "My mom does that when I am mean to my brother. She makes me go to my room until I am ready to be nice." "Exactly like that," Okonkwo agreed. "The galaxy is learning to be nice. It takes time, but we are patient." That night, a merchant vessel from the Venari homeworld entered Earth orbit. The first alien ship ever granted permission to approach. It carried trade goods, cultural artifacts, and a formal invitation for humanity to visit Venari Prime. The galaxy had once feared human ships. Now it welcomed them. Okonkwo watched the vessel dock from her apartment window. She thought about the journey, from isolation to protection to partnership. She thought about all the species that had tested Earth's boundaries and learned the cost. She thought about the peace that had grown from that terrible lesson. Her communicator chimed. A message from the new director of Global Defense, requesting her presence at tomorrow's planning session. The agenda included proposals to begin dismantling the oldest displacement arrays, weapons that had not been used in 15 years. Okonkwo smiled at the irony. They had built instruments of absolute defense, and those instruments had made themselves unnecessary. The galaxy no longer needed to fear Earth, because Earth had taught it not to need fear at all. She typed a simple response: "I will be there." Outside her window, the stars burned peacefully. Somewhere among them, civilizations that once plotted conquest now planned cooperation. And on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable sun, humanity continued its patient work, building a future where boundaries existed only to remind everyone what happened when they were crossed. The warning remained, the lesson endured, and the galaxy finally was learning to listen.